Welcome back, and now with the news in detail. We start our news bulletin from coronavirus pandemic that has now killed nearly 500,000 people globally. The number of infections from the new coronavirus worldwide has surpassed 10 million. It has been nearly 7 months since the first coronavirus case was reported, but the world is still struggling to curb the outbreak. Be it South Asia, Europe, Africa or Americas, the crisis continues to loom large. North America, Latin America and Europe each account for around 25% of the global cases, while Asia and the Middle East have around 11% and 9% respectively. The US is the worst hit country in the world with more than 2.5 million cases and over 125,000 deaths. The first cases of the new coronavirus were confirmed in January in China before infections surged in Europe, then the United States and later Russia. The pandemic has now entered a new phase, with Brazil battling the outbreak of over 10,000 cases a day. China has also imposed a strict lockdown on some 500,000 people near Beijing to contain a new outbreak. In some countries with limited testing capabilities, case numbers reflect a small proportion of total infections. Roughly half of the reported infections are known to have recovered. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, the number of COVID-19 cases has crossed 200,000 as more than 4,000 tested positive in the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says 83 new deaths were recorded, raising the total to 4,118. The ministry said over 92,000 people have recovered from the virus, while there are still more than 105,000 active cases nationwide. Out of these, the province of Punjab has reported more than 78,000 cases, while Sindh has registered over 78,000 infections. The ministry says some 1.2 million tests have been conducted, with 25,013 in the last 24 hours. Moreover, India has recorded its highest surge in COVID-19 cases as nearly 20,000 people tested positive in the last 24 hours. The country has now become the world's fourth worst hit, with over 528,000 infections. The Health Ministry said 410 people died in the last 24 hours, taking the death toll to over 16,000. Capital city New Delhi remains the worst affected, with over 80,000 cases. Among states, Maharashtra is the worst hit with over 159,000 cases. Guwahati, the capital city of Assam state, has announced a complete lockdown for 14 days to curb the spread of the virus. Saudi Arabia says it has forced 3 Iranian boats to retreat from its waters after firing warning shots. State media quoted a border guard spokesman saying the Iranian vessels refused to stop after they entered Saudi waters despite repeated warnings. But Iranian state media says the Saudi Coast Guard opened fire on fishermen who had strayed into Saudi waters. An Iranian spokesperson said no one was hurt in the incident. Kabul says it has killed 14 Taliban fighters in an airstrike in the Sozma-Kala district of Afghanistan's Saripul province. A spokesman for the provincial governor said local commanders of the Taliban were also killed, while 15 others wounded in the raid. The Taliban have not commented on the claim yet. Afghanistan's Interior Ministry says 15 Taliban were wounded in multiple raids on Sagar district of Ghor province. The US has condemned the killing of members of Afghanistan's Human Rights Commission, calling the attack anti-human. Washington's envoy Zalmay Khalilzad said those opposed to peace start fires they hope spread quickly and smolder indefinitely. Khalilzad said the US supports the overwhelming demand of Afghans to overcome these odds and continue the struggle for peace. 2 employees of the Afghanistan Human Rights Commission were killed in an IED explosion in Kabul yesterday. The Taliban denied involvement in the incident and condemned the attack. The White House says US President Donald Trump was unaware of the alleged Russian bounty offers to Afghan militants to kill American troops. The New York Times reported on Friday that Russian military intelligence had secretly incited the Taliban against the Pentagon. A White House press secretary, Kelly McEnany, said President Trump was not briefed on the alleged Russian bounty intelligence. She said the CIA director, national security advisor, and the chief of staff can confirm that neither the president nor the vice president were aware of it. Russia's foreign ministry says the published report was fabricated by the US intelligence agencies. It said the US media's such false publications had already led to direct threats to the Russian diplomats. The US says it has intercepted 4 Russian reconnaissance aircraft near Alaska. This comes after Russia intercepted 3 US spy planes over the Black Sea and escorted them away from its border. The North American Aerospace Defense Command said Russian Tupolev-142 jets came within 65 nautical miles south of Alaska's Aleutian Island chain. The command said the aircraft did not enter the US or Canadian airspace but strayed in the surrounding international airspace for 8 hours. The US and Canadian Joint Command said it was the 10th time this year that it has intercepted Russian military aircraft in the region. The US says Beijing cannot be allowed to treat the South China Sea as its maritime empire. In a tweet, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the disputes should be resolved in line with international law. Pompeo said Washington supports the Association of Southeast Asian Nations stance regarding the conflicts in the key trade paths. Earlier, in a statement, the 36th ASEAN Summit stressed the importance of safety and freedom of navigation in South China Sea. Beijing controls the majority of the islands in the territory, but Vietnam, Cambodia, the Philippines and others also claim their right. In France, the second round of the municipal elections has begun after a 3-month delay due to COVID-19 lockdown. Over 157,000 candidates are vying for mayor and councillor posts in some 5,000 municipalities. The first round controversially went ahead on March the 15th, just as the coronavirus pandemic was gaining momentum. But the second phase, scheduled for March the 22nd, was put off to June 28th after France went into lockdown. In Paris, the City Hall has distributed sanitary kits with alcohol gel, masks and wipes to 872 polling stations. Voters are required to wear masks and floor markings will help them observe social distance. In Poland, people are voting in a presidential election that can place significant curbs on the power of their nationalist government. Opinion polls show the incumbent Andrzej Duda in the lead, but short of a majority, needed to avoid a hard-to-win second round of vote on July the 12th. Duda is an ally of the ruling Law and Justice Party, and if he loses, the opposition can force a big change in the Polish politics. Europe is watching the polls closely as Duda's allies have frequently clashed with the EU over their controversial reforms to the judiciary and media. The president's main rival, the center-right mayor of Warsaw, has promised to repair ties with Brussels. There are 9 other candidates in the race, including Simon Holwinia, presenter of the TV show I've Got Talent. In Malawi, opposition alliance leader Lazarus Chakwera has won the presidential election rerun. The Electoral Commission said Chakwera secured the required majority with 58.5% of the votes, beating Mutharika. Chakwera said his victory is a win for democracy and justice. His win sparked late-night celebrations on the streets of the capital Lilongwe, which is the victor's stronghold. However, incumbent President Peter Mutharika alleged that the June 23rd election was marred by irregularities. Mutharika and his Democratic Progressive Party called on the Electoral Commission to annul the results and declare a third election. Libya's government of national accord says its forces will continue to cleanse the country of all Russian mercenaries and aggressors. In a tweet, the foreign ministry said the elements fighting for Haftar's forces pose a threat to the Libyan, regional and international security. In a statement, an army spokesman said Russian mercenaries developed command center to take control of the oil fields. He said the Libyan army is determined to save cities by making peace or with using weapon power. Meanwhile, Libya's Prime Minister Faisal Sarraj and Italy's Premier Giuseppe Conte have met in Rome to discuss the situation in the war-torn country. In Nigeria, at least 12 people have been killed in an armed attack in western Zamfara state. Witnesses say the armed gangs attacked the Ungwar Yabo village. Recently, the country's northwest has seen escalated clashes between the herder Fulani people and neighboring sedentary tribes. Nearly 2,000 people have lost their lives in the region, while thousands have been displaced in ethnic violence. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. In the U.S., 2 people have been killed and 4 others wounded in a shooting at a Walmart distribution center in Red Bluff, California. Red Bluff police confirmed the officers on the scene shot the assailant and took him to a hospital. The sheriff's office said the shooter rammed his vehicle into the building and opened fire with a semi-automatic gun. Police said the 31-year-old had a history with the facility, which had about 200 workers inside at the time of the shooting. A hospital spokesperson said 4 wounded are in a fairly stable condition. Meanwhile, 1 person was killed and another injured in a shooting during a protest in the U.S. city of Louisville, Kentucky. The Mexican authorities have carried out a series of raids as they investigate the attempted assassination of Mexico City's police chief. Investigators say they have arrested over a dozen people in relation to the attack on Friday. Investigators say they have also detained the alleged mastermind of the plot. Prosecutor's office said a group of assassins was hired 3 weeks prior to the attack and was divided into 4 different cells. Earlier on Friday, 28 hitmen injured the Capitol Police chief and killed his 2 bodyguards in an ambush. Sri Lanka has renewed calls for international monetary bodies to provide debt relief for the developing countries. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa says a debt moratorium of 2 years is needed to get the country back on track. In a meeting with the UN and UNICEF representatives, Rajapaksa said Sri Lanka's vital economic sectors are at a serious risk due to the pandemic. He said a debt relief plan will enable developing nations to quickly recover from the impact of the COVID-19. This comes as Sri Lanka and India discuss holding the loan repayment of $960 million that Colombo owes Delhi. Sri Lanka is scheduled to repay $2.9 billion of its total external debt this year. Madrid City Hall lit up the skies with drones to pay tribute to COVID-19 victims and frontline workers who fought the virus in Spain. 40 programmed drones with multicolored LED lights shone over Madrid. They created different forms, including a heart and 2 people. They also created messages of hope and flags of other countries fighting the coronavirus pandemic. The location of the performance remained a secret until it took place to avoid crowds and a large gathering. Spain has been one of the worst hit countries from COVID-19, with more than 28,000 deaths and nearly 250,000 cases so far. Facebook says it will start labeling newsworthy content violating its policies. A company spokesperson said it will label all the posts about voting with links to authoritative information, including those from the politicians. This comes after the social media company faced criticism over its lack of action on inciting posts by the US President Donald Trump. A growing ad boycott campaign, Stop Hate for Profit, has also been pushing the company to act on hate speech and misinformation. More than 90 companies, including Honda, Unilever, and Verizon, have joined the boycott. In a social media post, Facebook chief executive Mark Zuckerberg said no one will be exempt from the new policy guidelines. Amid the pandemic and Black Lives Matter movement, Hollywood celebrities highlighted the need to unite in order to fight COVID-19 and racial discrimination. The initiative, Global Goal, Unite for Our Future, featured a summit, concert, and video messages to raise funds. More about the star-studded event in this report.
When I was younger, so much younger than today.
The joint initiative by the advocacy group Global Citizen and the European Commission aims to raise funds to help lessen impact of the pandemic on vulnerable and marginalized communities.
When she was just a girl.
A historic summit raised $6.9 billion in pledges for governments, corporations, and philanthropists around the world. Hosted by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, the 2 hours concert included performances from Miley Cyrus, Coldplay, Justin Bieber, Shakira, Usher, Jennifer Hudson, Christina Aguilera, and the Queens. Celebrities including actors Kerry Washington, Forrest Whitaker, Salma Hayek, and footballer David Beckham gave passionate speeches about racism and the need to unite against it.
One of the many things that COVID-19 has reminded us is that the entire world population shares problems that do not see boundaries. We have beat viruses and many other diseases in the past.
Sometimes sports is a getaway for many people, and I think not having live sports has been a big miss for a lot of people. So to get sports back on, even though there's not going to be fans in the stadium, that is a big moment for a lot of supporters. The 12th man gets you through a tough moment.
Actor Dwayne Johnson echoed sentiments of many others that the tragic case of George Floyd was a flashpoint that changed so much.
Those devastating 8 minutes and 46 seconds validated the horrendous systemic racism and civil injustice we know to be present in our current reality. Equality is a fundamental right that we cannot allow to be dictated by income or race.
Former supermodel Naomi Campbell, heartthrob Hugh Jackman, Billy Porter, Olivia Colman, Chris Rock, Ken Jeong, and others also participated in the event.
Look into your eyes and the sky's the limit. I'm helpless.
And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. With the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.